A major oil refinery in Russia has shut down operations. The good drones are at work.
First, one pipe got hit, then they struck where all the pipes are.
Crimea is on fire. Special operations forces are torching enemy refineries. The story about tomahawks for Ukraine isn't over yet.
Discussions are still ongoing, but we have many delegations working here, supporting Ukraine in increasing financial resources to purchase military equipment from the US.
China and Russia are renouncing nuclear weapons. Trump on the new doctrine.
I spoke about this with President Putin. I spoke about this with President Xi. And everyone would rather spend all that money on other things.
Poland and Romania are strengthening their borders, and Warsaw is even conducting a general mobilization.
At least 400,000 Poles will undergo various types of military training in 2026.
The US is in a panic. China has commissioned its largest aircraft carrier, the Fujian. Meanwhile, the State Duma is proposing a nuclear strike on a model of the Pentagon, and Solovyov is shouting about NATO escalation.
Even if they hand over just one missile, even if it's launched from makeshift conditions, the number doesn't matter here. The principle itself is what's important.
Meanwhile, Ukrainian drones attacked the Kostroma power plant. By the way, friends, this is one of the largest thermal power plants in Russia. Also, it's extremely hot in Crimea. After the strikes near Simferopol, an oil depot called Kremlin is on fire, the bituminous settlements. And for the second time this week, the oil refinery in Sterlitamak has been hit. We'll talk about this and more with you right now in the segment. And afterwards, I'll be waiting for you in the studio to discuss it with an expert. Let's go!
Hot news for the occupiers. According to local social media, after drone strikes in Simferopol, the Kremlin oil depot in the Bitumnoy settlement is reportedly on fire.
It should be noted that after the strike by Ukrainian drones on the temporarily occupied territory of Crimea, 3 facilities containing combustible resinous materials are on fire. Due to special operations, key fuel and energy facilities ended up in the drone strike zone. These are facilities in the temporarily occupied territory of Crimea that are currently involved in providing logistical support to the Russian occupation army. This oil depot is one of the key facilities for storing dirty resinous materials and accordingly is involved in the material and technical supply structure.
Drones attacked one of the largest power plants in Russia, the Kostroma State District Power Plant, GRES.
This major power plant supplies almost the entirety of the central regions of the Russian Federation. Accordingly, it is involved in supplying electricity, primarily to enterprises of the Russian military-industrial complex. It should be clearly noted that this particular power plant supplies virtually all of the central regions of the Russian Federation, providing essential electricity and energy to these areas. Therefore, strikes on this particular facility, which is located here. Moreover, it is also worth mentioning that, in addition to what has already been stated, there are further points and considerations that deserve our attention as we continue this discussion.
Drones visited the Lukoil oil refinery in Volgograd, which is also considered significant for the occupiers' army. And this is a video from the Special Operations Forces. It shows the destruction of an enemy storage base for assembling and launching Shahed drones at Donetsk airport. It is noted that more than 90% of the SSO-launched drones reached their targets. Pokrovsk is neither surrounded nor under enemy control. Most of the city is a gray zone where both the Ukrainian armed forces and Russian opposition forces are present, according to deep state analysts.
There are also ongoing and accordingly successful actions to unblock logistics for the armed forces of Ukraine. Special units of the Special Operations Forces, the main intelligence directorate of the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine, and other components of Ukraine's defense forces have been deployed to the city. In addition, the grouping of Ukraine's defense forces in Pokrovsk has been reinforced with operational reserves and supplemented with armored vehicles.
In this footage, fighters from the Skelya Assault Regiment returned the Ukrainian flag to its rightful place, namely on the building of the city council in Pokrovsk. This confirms that the city stands firm just like all of Ukraine and will definitely withstand all the trials prepared by the occupiers.
Joining our broadcast is Oleksiy Hetman, military analyst and retired major of the Armed Forces of Ukraine. Hello, Oleksiy. We're glad to see you.
Good evening.
Let's start with the Pokrovsk direction. This is currently the #1 topic in military affairs. So reports say that the Russian invaders have reduced their activity. Strangely enough, the number of movements in Pokrovsk has decreased. In this way, the enemy is trying to minimize losses and is waiting for reinforcements from its main forces. This is reported by our Air Assault Forces Response Corps, the 7th Corps. So please tell us, based on what you know, what should we pay attention to and how would you assess the situation near Pokrovsk right now?
Well, the number of assault actions has decreased, but compared to the day before yesterday, when there were 100 combat clashes specifically near Pokrovsk, that's a record, the number of assault actions by the Russian Federation. We remember there were days when there were fewer than 100 along the entire front line, which is 1,245 kilometers long. But here, 100 out of 276 or 296 combat clashes in a day, almost 300. And out of those, 100 were in the Pokrovsk direction. So compared to the day before yesterday, there were probably fewer yesterday. But that doesn't mean they've reduced them overall. Near Pokrovsk, around Pokrovsk, a third and sometimes even half of all combat clashes along the entire front line happen specifically in the Pokrovsk direction. Well, in the Pokrovsk, Mirnogorsk, Konstantinovka areas over there, this section of the front line accounts for about 5% of the entire front line. And on these 5%, there are a third of all combat clashes. And the Russians are pulling in reinforcements there. By the way, they've already rotated their forces there 3 times. And the number there is estimated at up to 170,000. That's a little less than a quarter of all Russian military personnel involved in the Russia-Ukraine war. Their total number, well, the figure fluctuates, is between 709,000 and 712,000. That's the presence of Russian troops. And out of them, 170,000 are concentrated in the Pokrovsk direction. And a third of all combat clashes are happening on just 5% of the front line. Naturally, the situation there is quite complicated.
Okay, so please tell us about Kharkiv. I want to discuss it with you now, as well as the north, where Russian troops have also managed to achieve some success, as noted by the Institute for the Study of War. They refer to geolocated video footage that was published yesterday. These videos indicate that the Russians have recently made a slight advance in the southern part of Vovchansk. That's to the northeast of Kharkiv. Let's talk about this particular area. They've suffered heavy losses. It's reported that nearly 25,000 occupiers have been lost in just a month. But nevertheless, we can see that there is movement.
How could there not be? This isn't World War I. It's not just trench warfare. Even then, there were movements. As of today, from a military standpoint, according to military science, the front line can't be stationary. It's constantly changing. The question is, to what depth, to what percentage, so to speak, does the front line shift? If you look at the current fighting, the advance of our troops near Dobropilya, I'm not sure how to say it correctly in Russian. The slight advance in the Kharkiv area, the capture of Russian prisoners, this, from the point of view of the fluctuation of the front line, is considered stable. In other words, we can state that the front line has stabilized. This is not a breakthrough of the front line, but it never happens during active combat that an advancing army, there has never been such a case in history, reaches the positions defended by another army and just stops without advancing at all, as if hitting a concrete wall. There has never been anything like that in the history of war. Naturally, an army that has prepared, that is concentrating its troops, forces, and resources will advance. The question is by how much, in what time frame, and at what cost. If we take what we can already fully analyze, not 1925, but 1924, last year. There was also a lot of talk about advances, panic, everything is bad, they're moving forward, moving forward. The distance between Donetsk and Pokrovsk, and it was precisely in the Pokrovsk direction that the Russians made their greatest advance last year, is 55 kilometers between the main post office in Pokrovsk and the main post office in Donetsk. Avdiivka is even closer, that's about 45 kilometers. You can estimate it differently, about 40 to 45 kilometers. Over the past year, after sacrificing hundreds of thousands of people, the Russian army advanced a distance of 40 kilometers. Why are we always talking about square kilometers? Thank God we're not talking about cubic kilometers. Once again, over a year of fighting, an army of nearly 1 million managed to advance about 40 kilometers in a year. Is that a successful operation or not? This year, the Russians' advance is 3 times less. When we look at previous wars, at the history of wars, when we study or take an interest, we always analyze how deep one army penetrated into the positions of another army or another state. Honestly, I can't remember any time, whether in our studies or in movies or books, where square kilometers were used. Usually the depth of penetration is used. How far did they manage to advance? Last year, 40 kilometers into Ukraine. This year, even less. That's why we listen to and agree with the analysis from the American Institute for the Study of War and with various, let's say, respected publications, those that actually have people capable of analyzing, not just expressing their own particular point of view that's unrelated to a military perspective, so to speak. And almost everyone with one voice says that the Russian offensive, which, by the way, they announced and promoted since the end of last year, their spring, summer, and autumn campaigns have all failed. They were not able to achieve the goals they had set. They didn't succeed at all. And we agree with that. At the same time, while agreeing with this, we ourselves say the enemy keeps advancing, the enemy has captured yet another settlement and another one. Let's make up our minds somehow. You can't be in 2 places at once. Either let's say that the enemy is constantly advancing, or let's admit that their offensive operation has failed. In other words, we need to take a clear position. Trying to hold 2 positions at once. In medicine, this is called ambivalence. It's a psychological disorder. Let's be healthy people and choose one position, not 2 opposing ones at the same time.
Well, I think it's very important that you're explaining this difference to the viewers, that even...
I'm not trying to attack anyone. I'm just...
Yes. Just because there is some progress, it doesn't mean the operation is successful. That's something we also need to understand. That
doesn't mean, well, they advanced. Okay, they advanced. They lost people, as you said yourself, in the Kharkiv direction, where they made insignificant progress. According to geolocation data, they lost a huge number. Well, they're 25,000,
according to some estimates.
Well, and, I'll tell you more. They counted it up, though for some reason no one knew this before, but let's recalculate. When they attacked Bakhmut, they lost 1 soldier's life for every 42 centimeters of ground gained. 42 centimeters is about the distance from shoulder to shoulder for us, roughly speaking. So essentially they entered Bakhmut arm in arm. In other words, they weren't lying lengthwise, but crosswise. Every 42 centimeters, there was 1 serviceman of the Russian Federation. But with such losses at this rate, even with all their capabilities and manpower reserves, it won't be enough for them. And as for the advance, by the way, it was simply calculated. It's not hard to calculate time. The time it took them to advance after February, after Avdiivka over the past year, the distance they advanced, and you can calculate it. Knowing the distance and the time, we can determine the speed, right? Even in your school classes, I think in physics, you could calculate something like that. And the speed turned out, if you convert it to centimeters, the rate of advance was about in minutes. It was about 7 to 8 centimeters per minute. Is that a lot or a little? If it's 7 to 8 centimeters, that's about the size of our palm. If you put a snail on your palm, the snail will crawl across your palm in about a minute. That was the high speed of the Russians' advance in 2024. This year, even a snail could take a smoke break. They're advancing 3 times slower. So what kind of successes are we talking about for the Russians? Obviously, this is thanks to the courage and everything our armed forces are doing. But for some reason, we focus on the Russian servicemen, not on our own. Once again, last year, the speed of the snail's advancement in the most active direction was not along the entire front line, but in the very place where they had advanced the most. That's where they'll make the most progress. Their speed this year is 3 times slower. Well, what are we talking about? About what? Alexei, what panic sentiments? I'm not talking about you. I'm not talking about you right now. This is just...
No, I understand. Yes, you're speaking in general that...
Not the TV channels, but rather how many people, people in the rear, civilians. Listen, well, it's clear. They just...
Of course. I understand what you're talking about, yes. Well, people in any case, including the media, people want something to be done with the information. Absolutely. That's exactly what we won't be doing, so thank you for explaining everything. Let's move on. Look, President Zelensky has announced that there will be a special program aimed at protecting frontline cities, particularly Kherson, from attacks by Russian drones. Obviously, this means detection, interception, and neutralization. In your opinion, objectively, can this really protect our well, not rear, but yes, frontline cities? And in general, are there currently any means of mass protection, that could really allow Ukrainians to feel at least a bit safer? Take Kherson, for example. There are almost daily strikes on civilian vehicles, FPV, drone drops, and so on.
To minimize the harm, to reduce the number of attacks, to make them ineffective. Well, is it even possible to completely eliminate them? If there were means that could fully neutralize air attacks, missile strikes, drone attacks, then there simply wouldn't be any bombs or missiles launched at all. Why would they if there were air defense systems that could completely neutralize them? And that would be a different story. Maybe then they'd start sending moles underground instead. You can't get through by air, everything is blocked, and the ground is covered too. There are no such air defense systems in the world. They are being upgraded, but so are the means of attack. So yes, we can reduce the number of attacks. Yes, we can make air defense denser. As for involving, well, besides air defense, if we're talking about civilian facilities or those related to energy, to heat supply, our military leadership has said more than once that, we also need to reinforce things on the ground. In other words, it is important to strengthen protection for these areas. That is to say, for any facility, absolutely any facility at all. We're waiting for drones or missiles to be shot down, whether by ground-based air defense systems or by airborne air defense systems, if they're being taken down from planes or helicopters. Or at least surround it with sandbags, or at least make a mesh out of rebar and put it over the facility. What's the issue here? Sure, rebar won't protect against a missile, but it can protect against a drone. And if you even pour concrete over that rebar, it might even withstand a direct hit, depending on the thickness of the cover you put in place. So this is the approach. Everyone's waiting for someone else to do something for us, like with sandbags. Let's just do it ourselves. If you have any critical facilities, I would advise ordinary people, get together, maybe through your homeowners association or some other way, at least surround them with something, even if only partially, just with sandbags. At least do that.
Alexei, here's what I want to ask you. In conclusion, the aggressor country is significantly increasing the range of Soviet-era glide bombs known as Kabys by equipping them with jet engines. This puts even more strain on air defense operations, on Ukraine's air defense system. Please tell us what can be done about this. Are there any solutions, and what needs to be done?
How much time do we have? How much time do I have to answer?
At least 2 minutes?
2 minutes, that's good. I think I've got my bearings. You used the term Soviet bombs very aptly. These really are old bombs, FABs, so-called high explosive aerial bombs. They use what is called a Universal Planning and Correction Module, or UMPK. They attach wings to these missiles, and when they put wings on this bomb, it turns into a glide bomb. This isn't a CAB in the classical sense, because a KAB or UAB in Russian, a guided aerial bomb, is manufactured right away as a cruise missile, like the LIT. So, as some joke, it's like a poor man's cruise missile. It doesn't have the same navigation or control systems as a cruise missile, but it can maneuver to some extent. This is done right from the start. The fact that the Russians are using Soviet bombs and turning them into glide bombs, even adding jet engines, that's their modernization, basically just attaching wings to these bombs. What's the danger here? Well, they figured out, though it wasn't hard to figure out, that the higher the plane flies when dropping the bomb, and the faster it goes, the farther the bomb will travel. It's easy to understand. The higher up we go, say, to a higher floor, and the harder we throw a stone, the farther it will fly. Whether we throw it from the second floor or the ninth, or whether it's a little girl throwing it or a big strong guy, which one will go farther? It's obvious. To increase the range even more, they first started using powder boosters. So for example, the Su-34 drops this bomb, the powder booster kicks in, it accelerates even more, meaning it flies farther. They set the trajectory very precisely. It's all very simple. This is patent related. I think the patent for this engine was from the 1800s, the second half of the 19th century. So it was a patented engine like that. Basically, it's a very simple engine. It's noisy. Doesn't matter. With that, it can accelerate for longer, maintain its speed, and fly even farther. Its flight range is estimated to be over 100 kilometers. That's dangerous, yes. That means they can reach deeper into our territory. But there's always another side to the coin. Those glide bombs that used to fly 30, 40, or 50 kilometers, they fly in radio silence mode, as it's called. It doesn't leave any heat trail behind, nothing at all. So spotting it, intercepting it, the flight time is short, and intercepting it is quite difficult. But the one that flies with an engine leaves a heat trail behind it, and it actually stays in the air for a noticeably longer period of time than the one that would only be able to fly a short distance. Since everyone was paying close attention to this particular detail, what exactly did Vilku have to say about the city of Kryvyi Rih in this context? Previously, there was information from our specialists, let's say from air defense and Air Force experts, that it's practically impossible to shoot down these bombs, practically, at least with the means we currently have. And Vilku says that yes, indeed, they launched bombs with a jet engine, but 2 were shot down. Out of 3 or 4, but 2 were definitely shot down. So this means that these bombs, yes, they can now fly farther, but precisely because they have this engine and stay in the air longer, they can be shot down. In principle, they can be shot down.
Thank you so much.
For this weapon, that's its main downside, its negative side, its primary weakness. The weapon is able to fly farther, and it also flies faster than before, but paradoxically as it may sound, it has actually become more vulnerable to threats.
Well, let's hope that our military has both the understanding and the resources to implement these
measures. That's what Bill Coe said. It's not his personal opinion. He was simply stating the facts, for which, in principle, we should thank him for saying it out loud.
Thank you very much. Alexei Hetman, military analyst, retired major of the armed forces. We discussed the situation at the front with you in detail, and not only that. Thank you. All the best.
All the best.